Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's high noon Pacific in Seattle, and it's 3 p.m. on the East Coast. It's early evening over in Europe, and it's really early morning over in Asia. So thank you very much for joining us. Huge crowd today. Probably the third, I'm going to speculate, probably the third largest crowd we've had this year, so we really hit on a popular topic. That's fantastic. Little bit of housekeeping. So 2 days ago, Tuesday, we just completed our Phoenix Road Show. Jenny and Grant were down in Phoenix. They had a robust audience, and they presented Office 365 and Windows 10 content. We have coming up at the end of the month, late May, is Los Angeles. That's filling up quick. So you're going to want to go to smbnation.com and click over on the Roadshow advertisement over on the right. We'll also send you a link for this, but we have Los Angeles coming up in late May, and we have San Francisco coming up in late June. Jenny doesn't know this, but I'm going to see what I can do to get down in particular to the San Francisco event. I've been a little bit busy, but Grant and Jenny have done a super job. The content again is Office 365 and Windows 10. Other than that, the housekeeping, keep your eyes on the Sunday paper. We'll jump right into it today. So we have Symantec providing an academic conversation for us that clearly is needed because of the audience size. Beginner's Guide to SSL. And so I have Angelique Pereira on. And Angelique, where are you located today? Where are you sitting?
Hi, Harry. I'm actually located in Cape Town, South Africa. And as you were going through the times and the different time zones, I'm thinking that it's about 9 o'clock in the evening here in Cape Town.
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm glad we have summer timing because it would be even later, right? It'd be 10 o'clock if it were winter timing.
That is absolutely correct, yes.
Yeah, no. Well, good for you, Cape Town. Jenny and I were there 2 years ago. We did a series of workshops for Microsoft and Office 365. Went to Cape Town. Jenny stayed on an extra week with her husband for some tourism. So, you know, what a great place. Angelique, well, why don't we jump right into it if you want to take control of the screen and I suppose introduce yourself. Let's jump into the conversation. Beginner's Guide to SSL.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Harry. I am very excited to be here and to going through the Beginner's Guide to SSL with everyone today. And of course, Harry, as you already mentioned, my name is Angelique. I am a website security evangelist here at Symantec. And Harry already asked the question in case, for those of you that were wondering before, I am, of course, from the friendly city of Cape Town in South Africa. But yes, let's jump straight into things, Harry. There are many abbreviations that we use in our industry, and this can often cause a lot of confusion. So before we jump into a whole wind of the Beginner's Guide to SSL, I want to show you guys that the abbreviation for SSL stands for Secure Socket Layers. The Secure Socket Layer is a digital certificate that is specifically designed for data security. SSL certificates serve to create an encrypted connection, between your web server and your web browser, which of course in turn allows for information that you want to keep private to be transmitted without the problems of the information being stolen or eavesdropping. So now you guys have a very basic overview of what SSL means and what it does, but let's focus on how SSL works so that the information being sent or received is safe and secure from eavesdroppers or cyber criminals. Before I jump into how it works, I do want to remind you guys that every SSL certificate that is issued to a verified organization is issued for a specific server and website domain or address. Right, so once a person logs onto a browser and requests to access a web address, the browser connects to a web server. The web server then sends a certificate back to the browser. But before the secure session is established, the browser performs a few checks, such as the certificate authority that's issued the certificates, the validity of the SSL certificates, the fully qualified domain name, as well as the online certificate status protocol, otherwise known as OCSP. And really this is when the revocation status of the SSL is checked. All these checks run in the background and it is checked literally lightning quick. Once all these checks have been done and completed, will a unique session be established. You will notice that once this key is established, we say that the SSL handshake is completed and now the data being sent and received by the user is encrypted. Now, Harry, I often get asked by many of my customers if end users are able to see that a valid certificate is being used. There are a couple of ways for us to see if a certificate is being used by use of visual representations of online security. Let's have a look at what they are. The first noticeable visual would be when the letters HTTPS are displayed before the web address in the address bar of a browser. If there was no SSL certificate, you will notice that the S falls away and those letters become HTTP. And I did mention there's a lot of abbreviations in our industry, so for those wondering what HTTPS stands for, it stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. The second noticeable visual, and possibly the easiest to understand, is the padlock symbol that would be displayed in the web address bar, either in front of the web address or at the end of the address bar. And this, of course, would depend on whatever browser it is you're using. By clicking on this padlock, a browser window will pop up and will show the website visitor the authenticated organization's name. The next visual, possibly my favorite, is a visual that everyone will notice is displayed on the website pages itself, from the home page all the way to the checkout pages. Trust marks, such as the semantics Norton secured seal, and that is the circle with a check mark, are used to gain user trust. The industry is full of seals that are used, but there are seals that are more recognized and more trusted than others. The Norton secured seal, for example, is seen over 500 million times a day in over 170 countries, making the circle with a check mark the most recognized and trusted seal on the internet today. Last, but certainly not least, we have a visual that supplies the end user with vital information. The green address bar that is displayed has shown to increase a greater sense of security as well as gain trust from those that do business online. And actually, a recent study showed that 89% of online shoppers felt more at ease when they entered in their sensitive data into a website when they saw the green address bar. This visual, of course, doesn't stop at the green address bar. You will also notice when visiting a site with the green address bar that you are able to see the authenticated business name, which also toggles with the name of the certificate authority that issued out the certificate. This lets the end user know that they are indeed on the correct organization's website, and we will discuss what type of SSL certificate displays these visuals in slides to come. Where would I use an SSL certificate? So now that we know how to spot a valid SSL certificate in use, let's take a look at where you would typically use an SSL certificate. Firstly would be the most commonly known use for SSL, and that would be to secure communication between your website and your customer's internet browser. Now, we don't actually realize how much sensitive data we share via email. There is a chance that a cyber criminal is able to get their hands on these emails and abuse the information sent and received via email. It is for reasons such as this one that SSL can be used to secure email communication sent to and from your network. Next would be to secure internal communications on your corporate intranet. I honestly think that this use of SSL gets overlooked quite a bit, especially by smaller businesses. over the past couple of years, you will notice that some of the bigger breaches that have occurred have been because of lack of security on organizations' corporate intranet and information between servers, which brings me to my next point of where you would use an SSL certificate to secure information between servers, both internally and externally.
Yeah, and Angelique, I could add value here. Do you mind?
Yeah.
Do you mind if I
No, absolutely. Please do, Harry.
Add a story? So as I've made mention of on several webinars over the past several months, I consult industry in addition to SMB Nation, and so I'm assisting a big data startup part-time in downtown Seattle, and our biggest client is an online university, and the online university works with a lot of military students, so there's a huge compliance issue. One fine day about a week ago, and you know, no one's fault, but one fine day about a week ago, well, first of all, it's not my department, but our SSL certificate expired.
Oh,
and we got a call. Yeah, we got a call from the college. So number one, we have a compliance issue. Number two, we had a workflow issue. The potential student lead stopped coming into the system. I mean, I won't bore you with all the gory details, but suffice it to say, I'm well equipped for today's webinar to talk about SSL certificates. I just had an experience.
I'm so glad you immediately see the importance of SSL and how it could impact your business if the SSL certificate expires. It impacts the workflow of your organization. You're quite right.
It did. Yeah. Okay, please continue.
Okay. The next point is the use of mobile devices. Now, what I want to tell you guys is that the use of mobile devices used to conduct business or shop online also seems to be increasing at a steep rate year on year. I know for one, I do all of my shopping online, and I usually do it via mobile. SSL would also be used in this case to secure information sent and received via mobile devices. So you guys can see that there are, of course, a few places where you would be able to use an SSL certificate. However, the short answer to the question, where would I use an SSL certificate, is that you would use a certificate anywhere that you wish to transmit information securely. So by now, we know that a vital function of SSL is, of course, the encryption. However, most of us overlook the second vital function of SSL, which is the authentication. This is where the certificate authority validates that the organization is in fact real and that you are on that business's website. In today's day and time, with all that cyber criminals are able to do, we start to see how important it is to know that you are in fact on the organization's real website.
Yeah, Angelique, that kind of makes me think of a question here. So what are cyber criminals doing now that make it important for organizations to show the end user that they are in fact on a real business website? So end user on a real business website. That's what I'm trying to say.
Harry, that's a really great question. Cyber criminals have actually become a lot smarter because online visitors have become smarter. So over the past couple of years, there have been a number of breaches that have actually created awareness. So what it's done is it's made website visitors more aware of visual cues to look out for that shows that their information is safe and secure, such as the HTTPS and the padlock that I mentioned in a few slides before this one. Cyber criminals have now started to notice that online users are becoming smarter and have started doing things such as purchasing easy-to-purchase SSL certificates so that site visitors are actually fooled into believing that they are on a legitimate website. But we'll take a look, Harry, at what type of certificates cyber criminals tend to use more and why a few slides on.
Okay, very cool.
Perfect. So now we find ourselves asking the question, are all certificates fully authenticated and equal? Let's have a look at the different types of SSL so that we can formulate the answer to this question together. First up is domain validated certificates, or commonly known as DV certificates. A domain validated certificate is considered an entry-level SSL certificate and can be issued out very quickly. The only verification check performed is to ensure that the applicant owns the domain or the website address where they plan to use that certificate. Absolutely no additional checks are done to ensure that the owner of the domain is a valid business entity. And because there are no additional checks, DV certificates are issued out in minutes. I want to state that DV certificates should typically be used in situations where trust and credibility are less important, such as web-based applications that are not at risk for phishing or fraud. And here's, again, expanding towards your the question that you posed, Harry. It is because of the lack of authentication on DV certificates that cyber criminals are able to get away with using a DV certificate for phishing or fraud websites. The next certificate is the Organization Validated Certificate, more commonly known as OV certificates, which is the more secure step up from DV. OV certificates have added steps of authentication, and just like with DV, the ownership of the domain will be verified. However, with OV certificates, the certificate authority will also carry out additional authentication of the organization and the individual applying for the certificate. This might include checking the address where the company is registered and the name of a specific contact. This authentication company information is displayed to visitors on the certificate, making ownership of the site much more visible, which would provide a certain level of trust about the company who owns the website. So you can already see the difference between OV and DV certificates. Since OV certificates have a couple more authentication steps to that of OV, it does take certificate authority between 1 to 3 days to issue out an OV certificate. However, that is dependent on the pace that you get the required information to the authentication team. So remember a few slides back, I mentioned a visual cue that makes 89% of online shoppers feel better about entering in sensitive data online. Well, the next type of SSL offers just that. Extended validation certificates, or more commonly known as EV certificates, are the certificates that allows for the green address bar in a browser to light up in green and shows the authenticated business name, which also toggles with the name of the certificate authority that's issued that certificate out. EV certificates are known to have the highest industry standard for authentication of a business. And the EV verification guidelines are drawn up by the Certificate Authority Browser Forum, and they require certificate authorities to run a much more rigorous identity check on the organization and individual applying for that certificate. So you can now see that there's a lot more steps that go into getting an extended validation certificate, and it's because of these rigorous authentication steps that EV certificates take a little bit longer to issue out, and they could potentially be issued out in 7 to 10 business days.
Yeah, so that kind of begs the question, Angelique, that let me get this straight or ask it straight up. Do people and consumers, I mean, do they really trust EV certificates more?
Absolutely, Harry, absolutely. This little sign of credibility matters. The SSL EV green address bar actually increases the feeling of security for 60% of shoppers, according to a semantic online consumer study. And it's quite a high amount of website users that know and understand EV and the importance of it.
All righty, you've answered my question.
Great, I'm so glad. So let's recap. It's a lot of information to take in. Let's have a recap. So the CA, or the Certificate Authority, provides digital certificates, and that we know is known as SSL certificates. These SSL certificates provide two functions: encryption and authentication. And we've now seen how important authentication really is. Encryption and authentication then provide the users of the internet with everything that organizations need, and that is data security and trust. And at the end of the day, if you have trust, you have more conversions, and if you have more conversions, that equals more transactions.
Yep, absolutely.
So thank you very much, Harry, for giving
Yep.
me the opportunity to kind of chat about the beginning or the beginning stages of SSL and get everyone to have a basic understanding of SSL. I hope I was able to articulate it nicely.
Well, I've got a couple questions, and I've got a couple of observations. So folks, be sure to use the chat window to ask your questions. And if for some reason the questions go deeper, then certainly I can answer them. We'll get a semantic engineer on that as a follow-up. So we'll know, we know how to find you, and we'll get an engineer on it, so bear with us. But the other thing I would add is, again, my experience. I shared one example that I still liken to a compliance example with an online accredited college. The other is SMB Nation itself, and so it's been very interesting when we take credit card payments for different events and different activities. And we're like any small business, you know, we're always evaluating, I mean, quite frankly, how to save a few dollars on processing fees and that kind of thing. And when we crossed the yellow line once, a while ago, we crossed the yellow line, it must have only taken a few minutes before someone slapped our hand and said, you know, I'm not giving you credit card information, your connection's insecure. That was not our, and it wasn't our intention. It wasn't, we were not engaging in malicious deceit. I would offer it was purely driven by economics. But you know, we didn't make it. Oh, Jenny, I mean, it certainly no more than a half hour before we got our hand slapped. We fixed the problem, and quite frankly, it cost us a little bit more money, but that's the cost of doing business properly. So, you know, we do have some experience in this area, and what I affectionately call the real world. So let me go to my questions. Hold on there a second. Let's bring that up. Okay, we have one. Can I use self-signed certificate instead of SSL certificates from a certificate authority? Good question.
That is a good question, and it's a question we get asked quite frequently. So I would really only recommend self-signed certificates for internal test environments. For any public-facing sites, a publicly trusted certificate would be required. Self-signed certificates are not publicly trusted. If self-signed certificates are used, users would actually receive a security alert message when trying to access a site, and often the alerts advise the visitor to abort browsing the page for security reasons. And I mean, if you are generating income from a website and you're using a self-signed certificate, your revenue could definitely be negatively impacted. So I would definitely recommend to stay away from using self-signed certificates.
Yep. Another question here. What are the dangers of using self-signed certificates? You've kind of answered that, but let's go ahead and answer the question again.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually gonna answer this question in two parts. So the first is the risk of using self-signed on public sites. I've gone through some of it, but of course, the security warnings associated with self-signed SSL certificates drive away potential clients for fear that the website does not secure their credentials. And as I mentioned in my presentation, people that are doing business online or shopping online, they've become really smart, and they are definitely shying away from visiting or spending money on websites where they feel that they're not secure. So definitely the risk of using a self-signed certificate on a public website can be damaging to brand reputation, and of course the customer's trust is damaged. The second part of this is the risk of using self-signed certificate on internal sites, right? So self-signed certificates on internal sites, and I'll give you an example such as employee portals, right? They still result in browser warnings. Many organizations actually advise employees to simply ignore these warnings since they know the internal site is safe, but this can honestly encourage dangerous public browsing behavior. Employees accustomed to ignoring warnings on internal sites may be inclined to ignoring warnings on public sites as well, leaving them and your organization vulnerable to malware and other threats.
Okay, cool. Had couple questions are starting to roll in. Let's see. We have an individual who's just asked. So what is a UC, or I'm sorry, UCC certificate then, and how does it fit in this hierarchy?
All right, so I'm not actually an expert on UCC certificates. They are known as Unified Communication Certificates.
Okay.
It really is used in an internal environment for mail server-to-server communication. Symantec, I know, don't offer UCC. We offer something similar, which is called SAN, or Subject Alternative Name. So as I know that with UCC certificates, because you have mail.orgname.com or email2.orgname.com, the certificate allows you to secure multiple fully qualified domains in an internal environment.
Okay, no, great answer. Okay, here's another individual that just asked us, Google is now ranking HTTPS sites higher than regular sites. That's actually true. For standard sites, are there any technical benefits? I'm not sure I understand the question. I understand the first sentence, that's a true statement. The second sentence, let me see if I can get this. For standard sites, are there any technical benefits? You want to take that one on? I'm not sure Angelique, if you can get it, or sir, if you could resubmit the question, even better.
So the statement is absolutely true. I actually read this afternoon here in South Africa that the simplest answer to how to boost Google SEO rankings is to have a certificate installed on the website. There are technical advantages on some certificates when using some certificates, if I understand the question correctly. For example, there is a new algorithm that's been introduced called ECC, Elliptic Curve Cryptography. It has taken over that of server-gated cryptography, which we know as SGC, right? It is a shorter key length, which means there's quite a few advantages for mobile. The pages take faster to load with this ECC algorithm because the key is a lot shorter. I've also read some really great papers on how it actually helps improve your hardware and helps prolong your hardware so that you're not having to do updates and maintenance on your hardware frequently. I've also read some really great reports on how the ECC technology that comes with certificates now, I mentioned, increases loading times, and how mobile users get to benefit from it as well. It takes up less data. I don't know about in the States, but here in South Africa, data is actually quite expensive. So to find out that you can visit a site, yeah,
don't get me started about the data. I mean, with all due respect, don't get me. The cottage in the wine country, it was painful, very painful.
Yes, I don't imagine it's very pleasant for our visitors to be spending money on data, because it is quite expensive. But yeah, so ECC has a mobile advantage, and it helps to, prolong the data, and it also helps to prolong battery life. And of course, as I mentioned, it speeds up the loading times on your pages, which is really cool.
Okay, very cool. Well, we have another question here. Really good questions. This is a little bit longer, but it's actually a really good question. So we begin. Take a deep breath here. We have a client that is a law firm, and they have a SQL database using a URL base. Okay, fair enough. Users are accessing it locally only. We currently have a setup of a self-signed certificate. Do you recommend DV or EV? Law firm, SQL, internal use.
All right. So I would recommend, actually, it would all depend, right? So if the law firm, I know it's internal, but if the internal users are accessing whatever they need to access via a browser, and the law firm still wants those accessing that browser to know that it's a secure website, then by all means extended validation. And we've chatted about how much it increases trust for users. But if there is not a really big need to kind of portray trust to the end user, then I would suggest either DV or OV. I am not a very big DV fan, but only because I know of how it is used in the industry by cyber criminals. So I would even go as far as to say maybe purchasing an organization validated certificate for an internal environment.
Okay. Let's take a stab at this question. Angelique, it does kind of refer, I can appreciate if you might have to pass this on to engineering, and it refers to small business servers. So, but I'm going to read it. Let's see if we can get there. Certificates are no longer issued for the old, for the .local network, which was recommended the default for small business server for your internal domain, so .local. What are you suggesting going forward? So internal network .local certificate, what do you recommend?
All right, actually that's a really good question, and that's actually a frequently asked question as well. I would recommend to go and, so the reason why we don't issue our certificates to .local domains is because we can't verify the owner of that domain. All right, so what I would suggest is to just purchase a domain that you're going to be using internally, so that when we do authentication on that certificate, even if it's just authenticating that the domain is owned by someone, we will then have access to do that. What I can also say is that we also issue our certificates to IP addresses if the IP address is owned by that organization. So yes, .local domains have, or SSL certificates for .local domains have ended. However, there is a workaround. Just register the domain, or if you have an IP address that your company owns, we'll also be able to issue out the certificate for that IP address.
Okay, great. And then why are EV certificates so expensive?
All these questions, such great questions. I'm so excited. EV has a lot more steps, verification steps, authentication steps that go into it, which often require maybe 1 or 2 people to work on an order. So of course there's that overhead that you need to cover for. It is also the features that it allows the end user to see. The green address bar, we have to take all of those things into account. If there's more features on a certificate, then it will typically cost a little bit more.
Okay, that link that you have on your page, individual is saying midpoint on the left side of your page up, the crypto report, blah, 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 semantic.com. The individual is saying that they're getting a blank page that says this is a test site to simulate browser behavior. The question is, exactly what is the purpose for that link and how can they best use it? The individual feels they're just getting a blank page with some text on it.
Okay, that is strange. We will, maybe if that person can just leave the question in the, when it gets sent to us, so we can reach out to them directly.
Yeah.
But
you'll get that.
Really awesome. All right. So that crypto report, Semantics created a tool that users can use to basically check a certificate. Is it vulnerable to any attacks? Are there any breaks in the roots? Is it what type of certificate is it? Who is the owner of the certificate? There's a lot of different functions to that crypto report. I'm actually not 100% sure all of the functions, but I actually use that tool when I shop online to make sure that I am on the right business's website.
Okay. Moving along, got a lot of questions. Moving along, will TLS protocol be replacing SSL/HTTPS anytime soon?
Could you repeat the question, Harry?
Yeah. Will the TLS protocol be replacing SSL/HTTPS anytime soon? So the role of TLS protocol.
All right, so let me answer it this way. TLS, so what it stands for is Transport Layer Security, and SSL are protocols that provide data encryption and authentication between applications and servers in scenarios where data is being sent across an insecure network. SSL is actually the predecessor of TLS. So really, with the function, there's no difference in the functions of these certificates. TLS is just a little bit more modern than what SSL is, because when SSL was created, they labeled it SSL, and that's what certificate authorities are calling it, SSL. And I know that the semantic SSL certificates are compatible with both protocols. So no, I don't see TLS overtaking SSL in the function use. No.
Okay, the next question is, can you please talk about the difference between standard certificates and wildcard certificates?
All right, good question, very good question. All right, so we spoke about UCC, otherwise known as SAN, and that allows you to secure multiple fully qualified domain names on a single certificate, all right? Standard certificates, they are issued out to single domains. So if you are purchasing a certificate, a DB certificate, you either purchase one or for one domain, or you purchase 10 for 10 fully qualified domains, all right? Wildcard certificates is a very different function. So wildcard certificates, you can secure multiple subdomains on a single certificate. And what a subdomain is angelique.semantic.com, harry.semantic.com. That is the subdomain. Yep. So wildcard, you can secure multiple subdomains on a single certificate.
Okay, this one's a no-brainer. Who should the SSL certs be purchased from? Well, I think I know one company that sells them. Angelique, you want to answer that?
From a credible certificate authority like Semantic. I really want to use this opportunity to say that all CAs sell SSL certificates, but not all certificate authorities are equal. So when shopping around for an SSL certificate, make sure that you're looking at that certificate authority's reputation. How long have they been in business? Have they experienced any downtime? Those things could potentially impact you if you have an SSL certificate from them. So definitely shop around, search the certificate authority itself. But I think, Harry, you know that I'm going to say definitely purchase from a Semantic.
Of course, of course. Let's see, let's take this one. I'm going to bounce around a little bit here, folks. Here's one that says, can you please talk about intermediate certificates? Intermediate.
That gets a little bit complicated. Unfortunately, I'm not a technical guru. I'm happy, though, to get our engineer here in this office to answer that question. It gets very technical when we move into the different routes or intermediate kind of certificates. It definitely does get more technical.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Next question. If a padlock denotes DV and a trust green light bar EV, how can one tell an OV? How can one tell an OV SSL designation? Real question is, how can one tell an OV SSL designation?
Yeah, so that's also a very good question. Visually, there's not a lot. I mean, as a user just looking at the website, there's not a lot of a visual cue when it comes to OV certificates. However, what we've started noticing is that users actually end up clicking on that padlock, and that's when you're able to see that there is a certificate. As far as I'm aware as well, how Firefox, Mozilla show the different types of certificate, they show the padlock in a broken section if it is a DV certificate, and they show a little bit more green if it's OV. So it depends on the browser, but the only time to really know if it's an OV certificate is when you click on that browser and you can actually see the organization's name, the authenticated organization's name.
Okay, and Angelique, never underestimate the wisdom of the customer. We have received word that URL at midpoint on the left side. Folks, you need to put HTTPS // So ironically, that's the topic of today. So if you could complete that URL, Jenny over in the control room. Jenny, could you text that out to everybody up on chat, if you could make that to all audience, the proper URL having HTTPS before the balance of the URL. And we're talking about the crypto report. URL at midpoint over on the left. Let me check, Angelique, another thing. Yeah, you've already answered that. Let me look at last call for questions, folks. Let me back up. But let's do a last call for questions and okay, we did intermediate. Here's a comment from an individual. Let's take this unprecise. I'll just read it as is. Let me clarify. For regular non-commerce sites, it seems like overkill to do an SSL site. Will this prevent cyber threats? So I guess we have an individual asking maybe that the preventing cyber threats with SSL versus non-SSL sites. Well, it would seem like SSL is going to help prevent cyber threats. I mean, you know, my intuition would tell me the more the better.
So, of course, there's so many ways that cyber criminals can breach your website or a domain. There's so many ways. Maybe an SSL certificate alone isn't enough. I know that a big problem over the years has been malware, or there's been some big vulnerabilities that have been in place, and it's important to, be aware of if it is happening in your environment, and getting the help to remove that malware or to get the vulnerabilities taken out. So maybe SSL alone isn't enough, and maybe we need to start looking at as a complete security solution. I know that at Symantec we offer malware scans and vulnerability assessments with our solutions, because we do understand that SSL maybe just isn't enough anymore.
Yeah, and what I'm looking at, Angelique, bear with me. I'm going to smbnation.com. Folks, smbnation.com, click on white papers. I'm trying to think, it may be coming up later today. That's the only hesitation you hear in my voice, is that, yeah, you know what you can do, folks. Go to smbnation.com, go to white papers and download Threat Report 1, which talks to some of this. But we have another white paper coming up before end of week that talks to the other part of it. Jenny, could you make a note with the kind thank you note that you'll send out tomorrow to the attendees with a reminder of the white paper that we're literally just minutes away from posting up, that actually addresses this more. So that'll be great. Okay. I'll take one more. We have we have an individual. They're asking for the different credible SSL providers out there, and what I would recommend is, I think everybody should do their own research, but I think Symantec has proven the test of time, that you're here yesterday, here today, and here tomorrow, and I like that. I mean, let me tell you. I mean, yeah, if I'm working in a compliance scenario, it's not worth it to save a few dollars to cut corners. We have real business issues, real real activity that we have to hit head on. So
I 100% agree with you, Harry. Putting a dollar amount on the wealth or the health of your business, shall I say, just isn't good enough anymore. So we really need to, instead of looking at the dollar value, look at what the solution is going to help your business accomplish, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm looking at the lawsuit value over in compliance. But, okay. Hey, actually, we have a juicy one that came in. Let's go ahead and take this. When using hotspots, public Wi-Fi, it is commonly recommended to use a VPN to secure your internet usage traffic, period. If you only browse to SSL-enabled websites, does that mitigate the security issue? So public Wi-Fi, browsing only to SSL to have enhanced security. Angelique, I mean, it seems like it would, but you're more focused on this area. If you'd like to answer that.
I don't ever connect to Wi-Fi and hotspots, just because I don't trust that Wi-Fi connection. unless there is a password that is required. But yes, so only visiting sites with SSL would help mitigate running into any troubles or having any kind of malware installed onto your phone. However, you know, even having an SSL certificate, as I mentioned before, is not enough anymore because cyber criminals are exploiting that. So, I mean, I mentioned that cyber criminals are using DV certificates to fool users into thinking they're on a real website. So you could be visiting websites that are SSL only, and a fraud website could have the SSL, and you'll end up becoming a victim of identity theft. It is quite scary.
Yep. So folks, why don't we go ahead and bring it to a close today? And I know, so Angelique, it's now probably approaching 10 p.m. down in Cape Town, South Africa. 1 p.m. in Seattle, good Lord. But thanks so much. You know, we had a heck of an audience today, so thanks so much for dropping by to, you know, truly provide some educational content. Folks, a tip of the hat to Symantec, and we'll be back next week with our weekly webinar, so we'll get you the details. And I think Jenny gets a week of vacation coming up, well deserved. So enjoy the vacation, Jenny, and we'll see you next week, folks. Thank you very much for attending.
Thanks, Harry. It's been such a pleasure.
Bye-bye.